Welcome back. So I made you guys the video a week or so ago saying that I'm going to do another video explaining really what's going on, what I'm doing, the test, and giving you guys more details. But essentially we're just we've already busted the myth that your car, the internal combustion engine, doesn't only run on petrol if that's what it's designed for, or diesel if that's what it's designed for, LPG. They can run on other substances. In fact, a lot of other substances in their exact same form in terms of the internal combustion. You just change the way the fuel is put into the motor. There's lots of different ways. So we myth busted that in another video. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if you haven't seen it, just go on my channel and look back at the other stuff, and you'll be able to get an idea. But the last year, probably, I've been aware of this kind of topic and realized how easy it is to actually do it yourself and at home. And also realized when trying to research that there's really not very much good content out there. There is stuff, and it's been out there. I mean, this stuff's been known since the early 1900s. There were, plenty of dudes, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, that developed carburetors and different components that were added onto your car, which drastically increased your fuel mileage. I've heard something like there's thousands and thousands of patents out there for fuel systems and that kind of stuff, all that cannot be sold because of copyright and whatnot. But the cool thing about what I'm trying to do and what I am doing is there's no real patent, there's no special formula. I'm just kind of figuring this stuff out on my own and watching the little bit of stuff that's on YouTube. If you have looked at this topic before, you'll see that there's still probably hours worth of content out there, but it's pretty average, to be honest. And no offense to anyone that's doing that stuff, because you have helped me, but the video quality is real low. It's all like shaking around and you can't hear things properly. So it's quite kind of frustrating. Not that this is particularly, special or anything either, but I hope that at least you can hear me clearly. The video is quite clear, I can articulate myself quite well. So let me tell you more about this specific setup and what's going on here. As I mentioned, this is a 1989 Daihatsu Charade, made in Japan. It is a 3-cylinder 1-litre engine, carbureted, and it is in fact currently my daily, but it is going to be off the road soon. So everything that I do, I'm careful. I don't want to make any changes that can't be reversed easily. And everything that I have done to the car so far, if I wanted to make it back to stock, I could probably do it in about 20 minutes, which is cool. So I will show you out there, I'll show you what's going on, but I just wanted to really make a video and really give content for this whole topic and put it all in one place as best I can, because like I said, you'll have to watch hours worth of content, and it can be kind of painful at times to go through it all and that kind of stuff. The other big thing as well is all of the content's in America. Like, pretty much I've only seen not even a handful of videos of blokes in Australia doing this and trying this stuff out. Not that there's not people doing it, but the content's just not really out there, especially in video format. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely prefer to go on YouTube and watch something as opposed to checking out a forum that was made like in 1980 something with Windows XP. Yeah, babe. So there are a number of different ways you can do. And the more that I learn, the more I'm like, there's so many different things. But essentially what I'm trying to find and the information I'm trying to give to people is what is cheap, accessible, easy to do without needing fancy tools, without needing a whole lot of expensive brass fittings and just technical things that kind of just make it harder for people to go, cool, it's good for you, but me at home in my backyard, with my standard kind of tools, not something I can do. I'm not trying to make that kind of stuff. So everything that I learn and test, I try and go, is it doable? Is it cheap? Can you get the parts from your local car parts store, Super Cheap Auto or Bunnings, or something like that? Or is it something you gotta like research and find out? I mean, I'm really trying to keep this budget. So apologies if I kind of ramble and go kind of all over. I haven't really structured this, but I just wanted to talk about it. So the first thing that I did with this car, as I showed you in the first video, was the bubbler system. And how that works is the engine is a vacuum. So as it's running, it's sucking in air, it's burning it, and then sending the emissions and everything else out the back of the car. Just so that people know, currently our petrol engines run at a 30% efficiency, which means what they're putting in, they burn 30%, that's what gives you the power, which leaves 70% of shit goes out the exhaust, all kinds of toxic stuff that's killing the world, and we're trying to avoid that. More money in your pocket, but doing good for the planet too. So the bubble is, the engine is a vacuum, yeah, so sucking air in, pushing air out. And then what I did is had a box with fluid in there. Probably best just to watch the other video. And as it sucks air in, it sucks air through that pipe, through the water, and causes it to bubble. And that bubbling pretty much just disturbs the petrol and creates more surface area and bubbling, and just really just stirs it up, so that the vapors that come off the petrol are then sucked into the engine, and you can run entirely off petrol vapor. But I don't know the exact technical kind of terminology for it, but essentially it's something to do with, it's like a soft or a light component of the petrol, and what happens is that gets burned up quickly, and then you have a whole lot of fuel that after a while it kind of goes stale or whatever it does, and it won't bubble anymore. And you would see that in the end, toward the end of the video where I said I went for a drive, I'd probably been using this little bit of petrol for about an hour, and even in that time it wouldn't run. The thing that I'm doing now is heating the petrol. If you've looked on YouTube and whatnot, you might see people talking about fuel preheaters. Essentially they tap into their fuel line before it goes into the fuel rail, because most dudes are doing it on fuel injected cars. Tap into the fuel rail, and then pretty much they just splice it, and then a copper pipe will either come out of that and then go over to the radiator hose, and they often will replace a piece of that radiator hose, which is rubber, and put a piece of copper in there or some type of metal, put it in there, clamp it on, and then their new hose, which is also copper, which is the fuel line, they wrap it around that and then send it back into the car. That heats up. The thing that I thought of, and I thought this was pretty logical, is that cars only get up to about 100 or so degrees. That's Celsius, because we're in Australia, if you're watching overseas. Your car kind of gets anywhere from 80 to maybe 180 if you're pushing your car hard, that kind of stuff, just for a standard car I'm talking. And so I thought that cooling system is always trying to keep your engine at about 100 degrees or less. It's trying not to boil the water. I think the water mixed with coolant, instead of boiling at 100 degrees, brings it up to about 120 to 140 depending on the brand and the mixture and whatnot. So it kind of likes to keep it in that range, right? And so I thought, by the time you bring your fuel over, you're running it through there and then going back, you're going to get a lot of heat loss. I've seen blokes that have put covers over it to stop, as you're driving, to stop the air blowing over those pipes, cooling it down. And I've seen dudes wrap them up, which makes sense. But I still thought, if that hose is at 100, even if you had 100% efficiency, that petrol can only get to 100 degrees. And that's not a whole lot, because we know that petrol has an auto ignition of 280 degrees approximately, which means you're only virtually a third of the way. And the closer you get to that 180, the more fuel vapor you're going to make when it's heated up. So what I did, and some people have done it but not too many guys, they heat up their fuel via the exhaust manifold, or another guy I saw heated it up off his off the catalytic converter. On my car, usually your cat is someone down the middle of your car, or maybe toward the footwell underneath. In this car, in the Charade, it goes the header, your three exhaust ports come out into the top bit, and then they go straight into the cat, and I'll show you that so you can see better, and then I just wrapped a coil around that, and I've measured that my manifold at idle gets to about 140 degrees, and when revving it, you know, medium to low revs, but holding it there, I just chocked the pedal, it got up to about 280, and then that's when my thermometer kind of you know, stopped working. It maxes out at 300, so I have to get something hotter. But essentially I know it's getting up to about that 300 degrees, you know. And you might think, well, 300 degrees, petrol explodes at 280 degrees. You know, you're crazy, you're stupid or whatever. But the thing is, that is the manifold heat. But then that manifold has to radiate heat then through, you know, any type of gaps in air you have, then into the copper, and then it has to heat up the fuel inside of that copper. You know, while your engine's driving, it's going to have wind blowing on it and whatnot. And so I just, from a common sense point of view, there's no way that you could possibly get your fuel up to 300 degrees if the manifold's at 300 degrees, unless you soldered the copper pipe onto the cat, you wrap the hell out of it, and then you also put a guard over the front on your bumper to stop the air as it goes in, you know, cooling it down. Plus then you're going to have your hose that goes all the way up, either back into your fuel rail, or in my case it just goes straight into the carburetor. Advice for people: if you can, do this with a carbureted car. It just makes it that much simpler, that much easier, because there's essentially less components, and it kind of makes sense. If you're going to heat up petrol to several hundred degrees, and then you're going to run that through your fuel line, and then, you know, obviously into your rail and into your injectors, well, it's not designed to do that. And they might work fine, but from a common sense point of view, you're probably going to do damage. You're probably going to wear down components quicker, versus a carburetor. All you got is pretty much everything's metal, and your fuel line goes into it, it does some things inside there, and then essentially it just has a little jet. If you've ever looked inside a carburetor, you'll see there's a little jet that just sticks out, and as your butterfly valve opens, it's just squirting petrol directly into there. With me heating it up several hundred degrees, even if I heated it up beyond its auto igniting point and it came out as pure vapor, that would still work. You know, I would probably have to change the fuel to vapor ratio, but I know that with this car, and with how it's a tiny car, you know, as I said, a 1 litre 3-cylinder engine, I just highly doubt that the petrol's going to get to that hot. So I'm actually I've been doing testing and making sure, you know, things, you know, are safe, and seeing what temperatures my fuel line gets, seeing how hot the manifold gets, seeing how hot the actual fuel itself gets, and everything is actually showing quite significantly low heat, which is actually kind of disappointing, because I'm almost thinking that everything I've done, even though I've tried to get it hotter, is still going to be piss all. But here's the exciting part: I am doing the actual fit on today. I'm going to connect it all up. I'm going to see how it goes. I assume that I'll just put it on and it should just work. I see no reason why it shouldn't. But yeah, the only thing about it though is that all of my tests I've been, you know, idling or sit in the car. When you're actually driving it around, obviously your manifold and the engine itself is going to get much hotter. So essentially what I'm going to do is connect it up. I'll test it here first, make sure it just runs and everything's, you know, seems okay, there's no leaks, you know, check my temperatures and whatnot. Then I'll probably do a medium to high rev experiment. I'll just, you know, chock up the pedal and just let the car run for 5 or 10 minutes, let it get real hot, see what happens. Because obviously if something bad's going to happen, I prefer it to happen, you know, at my property, you know, where it's kind of safe. I've got water, I've got fire extinguishers, as opposed to just being out on the road, you're driving around and then something blows up or a flame comes out or something. Not that I expect that to happen, but yeah, I mean, you just got to experiment and find out. That's the thing. I mean, so many times I've read things on Google and then you watch a video and they say that's not true. For whatever reason, Google and the information and people that post it, they do it, but I don't know, it's like as if, you know, it's all theory, like no one actually did it. So I've heard that even though we say the auto ignition point of petrol is 280, I've heard that petrol can get up to like many hundreds of degrees and it still won't ignite. There was a guy talking about how the way he vaporizes his fuel is he has a box with a steel plate inside of it, inside the engine bay, and he runs enormous current through it. And it's essentially like a big shunt. And he said he gets that steel up to, what do you say, 600 degrees Celsius. He said the steel is glowing slightly red, and then inside that box he has a car injector, which is just rigged up separately, not inside any housing or anything, and the injector sprays fuel onto that steel, and then because it's the injection is already so fine as opposed to a whole droplet, or as opposed to what I'm doing, which is just liquid, you get a much faster and much more vapor because you spray it onto that hot surface. And he said that he's built that machine, and he figured this out in, like, I don't even know what it was, like the 50s or something, or the maybe 60s, maybe it was 60s, 70s. He said he's had it on, one of his trucks. He's had this system on for like 30 years. He's like, it's bloody awesome. So, yeah, I'll take you out and we can have a look at what we've done. Right, so as I showed you guys the other day, that's the manifold I was talking about, and it's got the cap right there, and then the copper pipe, which I've just coiled around. I had to take the whole manifold off, take everything off, disconnect the exhaust, take it off and wrap it around carefully without kinking it. And then obviously you can see that, and then I've got two of these. Yeah, these are just basic stuff from Bunnings that you use for your plumbing, and then just force that in there. I had to drill this out to make it fit, but make sure it was super tight. I don't actually have anything holding that. That's literally just held in there by pushing it in there, but I don't know, it took me about 10-15 minutes just to get two of them in there, so I tried pretty hard, and I'm pretty secure, pretty sure that that's going to be secure. So pretty much got my carby, as I mentioned, and this one here is the actual fuel intake, which pretty much just runs underneath there and comes from this thing. Honestly, I kind of play with cars and stuff, but I don't really know the names of all the stuff, so I don't even know actually what this is and what it does. It's got a bunch of hoses and stuff that go into it, but all I know is that line there is where the fuel comes out, and obviously, like I said, fills that up. So all I'm literally doing is I'm going to take both ends of this hose, which is connected to that, and one is going to go to the intake, one's going to go to the outtake, and as it runs to the engine, it's just going to get heated up on the coil and then go inside the motor. And because it uses such little fuel, because essentially it's got a lot of fuel that goes in, but it just gets backed up, and it only obviously injects however much you accelerate. So I'm going to have a lot of fuel inside here that's not going to be getting used for a long time. Like the amount of petrol that could be in these lines could be me doing a whole trip of driving for like an hour or longer or something, because it's such a fine little jet of fuel that gets injected into the motor. So, but here's the thing, this is all theory. I just got to plug it in and try it. So I'm going to rig this up and show you guys that it's all working, and hopefully we can go for a test drive without any dramas. Alright, so I've got it halfway rigged up, but what I want to do is to start the motor, let the fuel run through, to make sure everything's running through okay, fill up the coil pipe, and then once I know that it's all primed, then I'll connect it onto the carburetor. So I'm going to do my best to try and capture all this one person. So it's just the fuel there. So that's how much fuel comes out, which is heaps, obviously. Right. So, I mean, that's how much fuel just came out after running it for, whatever it was, 30 seconds or something. So that should be all primed, and that should be quite full of petrol. What to do with this now? Put that there. And here's the thing as well. I mean, let's see if we can get some more light. I mean, that doesn't look great. What I'm finding is, because I've put, the first time I did the test, I just did it with water and it got to boiling really quickly. So I thought that's good. And then since then I've been putting petrol in the copper, and I'm just not sure if there's just crud in the copper, because I didn't have new copper. Like I said, this is all budget. I was just recycling you know, old materials. So I don't know if there's just crap in there and it needed to be flushed out. I filled it up 2 or 3 times. 2 times. And yeah, it looks like that. It's a bit of shit in there. So hopefully, I don't know, like, it kind of heats it up and keeps everything okay. But anyways, I'm going to do the final hookup, start it up. It should just run and drive like normal, and there should be 0 differences until the petrol gets heated up. So I suppose I'll just come back to you guys when, yeah, there's heat. Alright, I've got everything connected up. Once again, I'll show you. Essentially, you just got the coil pipe, comes up 2 hoses that you can see there. One is just running underneath, and that runs, essentially it goes underneath there and up there. So that's obviously the feed, that's the input, sorry, the kind of output, so to speak. And then that's the input that just goes directly into this thingamabob. So yeah, now I'll start it up. Everything should just work fine, and then essentially I gotta wait for everything to just heat up and get hot. I'll let it idle for a little bit. Can you see in there? Not really. Found a leak already. I fixed up the leak. Silly me, I just, when I was testing things, whenever I put one of the brass fittings on, but I just did it hand tight, forgot to do it up with the wrench. So fix that up, and we're going to go have a look. Alright, well, there's a little bit of testing. Everything seems to go okay. Honestly, I can't, it's quite hard to get an accurate temperature of the actual petrol itself. I can only measure the outside of things. I don't know if it's hotter or colder. It's probably hotter, so I don't know. But the engine is still running just as it was normally. And as you would have seen, there was a little bit of, well, I don't know if it was just smoke, if it was smoke, oil residue burning, or if that was actually vapor, little bits of vapor you were seeing coming out, I'm not sure. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back together properly. You would have seen in the other video that it had like the actual air intake. There's a few vacuum lines and whatnot that I've kind of just left open because I'm not really sure what they do or anything. But I'm going to put it all back to factory, but leave the heated fuel in. I'm just going to go for a 5-10 minute drive, probably check the temps and see what happens. This is exactly how the car is factory, aside from obviously the car preheater. Now honestly, I'm not expecting really anything to be any different, because you kind of have to really drive it and then do a whole tank and then see. Or I could do some kind of thing where I rig it up normally, have a glass or some type of container, and then it's quite small. You see how fast the fuel runs down, you time it for 10 minutes or so. They do the same thing on Vapour, which I might do, but honestly it's probably easier to just drive the car around and see what happens. So we're gonna go for a test drive. Alright, hopefully nothing blows up. First test drive with the car preheater. I've been running this engine now for about an hour, I reckon. One thing that I've already noticed is that it wants to idle lower, so the car will actually stall if I were to just leave it. But one thing I'm going to do is just drive it around and just see how hot it gets, because I haven't actually tested the heat when I'm actually driving, so I've got to check that out and see how hot the manifold gets, because I know that the cooling system, the radiator, will make sure the car stays between like 100 and 140 kind of thing, maybe less for a little car like this. Oh, it's almost moving the stall. Right, and so the coolant will turn on, and the thermostat and all those different systems will work together. And that keeps the engine roughly at a certain temperature, but the exhaust manifold, unless you've got an EGT, monitor, temp gauge, whatever, you never really know, and I don't really know either. So essentially just going around the block, trying to not let the car stall. Oh wow, I got no fuel. I gotta go put some fuel in. I haven't got my wallet, do I? Alright. I'm pretty sure I'm actually out of fuel. I was actually like on empty, and now I've been playing around and I've wasted some fuel and stuff. So. Also started. Alright, well, what I'm going to do then is drive to the servo and then check the temperatures with my little cheap thermometer, and hopefully it's less than 300 degrees. Surprisingly, even after all of that and having the engine running, we're only sitting at 198 degrees. So this manifold must not get that hot. I mean, I saw things where people talking their manifolds get to 500, 600, 7,000 degrees. I thought, struth, that must be pretty bloody hot. Maybe that's like a big four-wheel drive and 35-inch wheels and you're just going up a bloody hill or something. I don't know. But anyways, that's good, and that's within the safe range. I still got 100 degrees that I can play with before this little thermometer gives out, so that's alright. Alright, so I've just filled up my car with fuel. I had some jerry cans, so I topped it up halfway with that and then just filled the rest with fuel. I just reset my odometer, so I'll be able to see how I go. I'm back to work tomorrow and see if there's any changes, or hopefully if everything continues to go well today, I might just leave it in and see what happens. Keep some tools with me, maybe get a fire extinguisher or something. But yeah, and then the other thing to keep in mind as well is now that everything's sealed off, there is some pressure, because obviously, so this car doesn't have I'm not entirely sure, but I'm fairly certain it doesn't have, well, it definitely doesn't have an electronic fuel pump. So it has some type of mechanical pump. I don't know if that works off the engine, or if it works off like the vacuum of the engine. It probably works off the vacuum of the engine, and that's how it works, whatever, which is cool. So, but the thing is, so as you saw, the petrol's coming out at whatever speed, but once everything's fitted off and tight, then there's going to be pressure there, so it's going to be trying to pump the petrol in, but obviously a little bit's just getting ejected at a time. which means there is going to be some level of pressure in there. And I know that the higher the PSI, the hotter substances can get before they reach their like the point where they auto ignite. So we might have 280, but with the, I mean, I don't imagine it'd be much, you know, maybe like 5 psi or 10 psi. I couldn't imagine it being more than, you know, 20 psi of, you know, through the fuel system. But that could potentially change. I literally have no idea here. This is just vague things that I've kind of learned, but I haven't looked into the nitty gritty and done the math on it. But we could look at, instead of 280, it could be more like 300, 350 or 400 degrees. I've heard guys saying that because they were running their fuel system with injectors, right? They said they could not get the fuel hot. Just the pressure, it just, for whatever reason, stopped the fuel getting hot. So like, I had it wrapped around my catalytic converter. I soldered the whole thing around so that every piece had contact. Then he wrapped it, and he said he still could not get the petrol to vaporize. And his car was running at 36 psi, which sounds like about normal for your car fuel system. So anyways, let's go check outside, see what's happening with this car, see what's happening with the temperatures. What do we have here? 100 and what does it say? 180? 183. So it's not really that hot. So, I mean, I've never really seen it going above 200 then. I saw it touch 190 before, 180. Everything seems to be, you know, running as normal. Back home. So really the only thing I can notice at the moment is that it just wants to idle lower. Sorry, it idles lower. So the car will stall out if I stop and don't rev the car a little bit. So I'm not sure how I'm going to manage that. Might just do something, a little dodgy something or whatever. But yeah, so far all is good. Haven't found any leaks. I haven't had temperatures, you know, not even slightly close to the point where it's supposedly meant to auto ignite. So yeah. And I can't say I noticed any more power. Dudes are saying when you run a Vapour, they feel you get more torque, more power, and that's what gives you the fuel economy. Because if a car has more power, you don't need to drive it as hard, you don't need to accelerate as much, easier on the throttle, etc, etc, and that's why you save, because you're getting a more complete combustion. But it doesn't feel like I'm getting any more power. I'm not sure if it's just because I've been around the car now so long, breathing in all the fumes, but when I smelt the exhaust gases, it didn't smell as bad as usual. But like I said, I've kind of been in a somewhat confined space for like an hour and a half, probably an hour and a half. So maybe our body's just used to it, which is a terrible thing, because those fumes are so bad for you, so bad for the world. So alright, time for the conclusion. I've just driven around for, I don't know, whatever, 10 minutes or something like that, and I gave it a hard time. I wasn't changing gears, I was revving the shit out of it, trying to get it to, you know, stay real hot and whatever, just to simulate if I'm having a bad day driving hard because traffic's bad or whatever, to make sure that that manifold doesn't get too hot and therefore potentially heat up the fuel too much to get it to that point of auto ignition. And the good news is we are far from it. So I've just parked the car here. I've been driving for a while, and it said about 240 before, and you know, that's just right, you know, right in there. And so pretty much what that means is, if we're only getting to about 220, 240, and that's when the car isn't moving, which means the heat can collect a lot more, whether it's when you're driving. I was quite surprised. how much it cools down the motor and that manifold, which is actually bad because I really want to get that fuel up to about 200 degrees. And at this point, if that manifold's getting to about 200, that petrol I'm sure is only like 50 or 100 degrees, you know, depending on how long you drive for and if you're sitting in traffic or if you're on the freeway. So what I might do is, I haven't found any leaks, I haven't found any problems. I'll try and sort out why it's idling lower. I may even put the original, they had a what's it called, like the manifold, you know, shield over it and modify it just to fit that in there. And yeah, hopefully that's it. And slowly it's just dropping down. So I'm just going to do that. We'll be heating up the fuel. I'll try it for a week. Hopefully nothing goes wrong. I'll keep some tools with me. But that's kind of it. It's not a super exciting video, but it's cool to see some testing, and no doubt there'll be people that will be wanting to see future videos on what happens and the progress and my learnings and whatnot. So if you like this kind of stuff, if you're interested in this sort of thing and you like the way that I do my videos in this sort of kind of format, let me know. It's hard for me to know unless, you know, you guys are actually telling me in some way. So if you're watching this on Facebook, you know, like it and comment, share it. And pretty much the same thing on YouTube. They're pretty much the only platforms I'll be putting this kind of, you know, stuff on. So yeah. And the other thing is as well, I find lots of people love to give advice, but you know, words are cheap, as they say. Send me a link to a video. Do the test yourself, do some type of experiment and show me what you've done on your car. I'd love to see the modifications you've done. I'd love to see how you've made your car more fuel economical, or any other kind of cool hacks and whatnot you can do to change things up. The other thing I've been looking into as well is hydrogen. I'm looking at hydrogen generators, seeing dudes mixing liquid petrol with hydrogen gas. That's also something I'm considering. If I do, for example, heated fuel and then I have a separate hydrogen generator to do that. I suppose I maybe should explain a little bit for anyone who may not know exactly what I'm kind of talking about here, because I just realized I just kind of jumped ahead. But essentially, right, water, H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. When you have water in a container and then you have current, electricity running through it, which people use just metal plates, and you put electricity through that water, the electricity, as it passes through the H2O, it separates the atoms and you get H2O and you get oxygen. And so essentially dudes make little generators. You know, some of them are, you know, really rough and some of them are pretty professional looking. They build those and then pretty much they do things like fill up, you know, like bottles and stuff like that and blow them up, you know, and have fun in that way. And I've heard some dudes that want to put it into car fuel systems, and I know that there are actual companies, even here in Australia, I've seen some in the States as well, where they actually make a professional machine, some of them big, some of them small, that produce hydrogen and go in. So that's another option I'll be looking into too. But something for future videos. Like I said though, if you like this kind of content, let me know, like it, comment on it, and give us your feedback. Thanks for watching.